When the NFL and politics collide. We got an interview for you right here on Tru-ID.
There was a Trinity Radio episode.
Because you guys preach stuff that is like literally unrecognizable to an ancient African.
You know what I'm saying? It's urban apologetics. You know what I'm saying? Showing black dignity with the gospel. What up, y'all? It's your hometown hero, the real Adam Coleman. Y'all know what it is, man. Tru-ID Apologetics. And I'm here with a friend of mine, man. A friend of mine, but it's been a while, to have him on the show. Glad he's here. He got a whole lot to say. So I'm gonna bring some different perspectives that y'all probably won't really see too much on the channel. So I'm really excited about this. My guy Don Carey, what's happening with you, bro?
What's going on, bro? How you doing tonight?
Doing well, man. Doing well. You know what I'm saying? So as well as I can, after having changed probably the nastiest diaper that I've seen in quite a while, like literally right before we hopped on. You know what I'm saying? So I'm still traumatized, but you know what that's like,
The best part.
Yeah, well, we'll go with that. Yes, but I'm here though, man. It's great to have you on the show, man. We talked about this for a while, but just real briefly, just kind of let people know who you are.
Sure. So, grace and peace, everyone. My name is Don Carey. Currently serve as a council member in the city of Chesapeake. Prior to that, played in the NFL for 10 years, 2 years with the Jaguars, 8 years with the Detroit Lions. Was blessed to partner with Lisa Fields and Jude 3 to create the Unspoken documentary, which traces the Christian heritage of Africa. We did that partly to dispel the notion of Christianity being a white man's religion, something that was beaten to slaves. Father of 4 kids, 3.5, one's on the way.
There you go.
Married for nearly 10 years to my beautiful bride. Just happy to be a community servant. Happy to serve my Lord in any capacity that I can.
Awesome, man. And you forgot author as well, because you have a book that's out also. You definitely want to leave that out.
Ooh, yeah. You got it.
There you go. So here's the thing, man. I know we caught up, I want to say like at the tail end of your stint with the Jaguars, I believe. I'm saying I think that's when we clicked up. How did you kind of get into the apologetic space? Because going from knocking people's heads off in the NFL to getting their minds right for Jesus, that's 2 different worlds. You know what I mean? Like how did you get into apologetics in general?
So it kind of happened by happenstance, bro. I mean, I would come into the locker room and hear conversations that players were having. And it's pretty interesting. I would tell individuals conversations in the NFL locker room are microcosms of society, because you have people from different walks of life coming into this space, and you're literally with these people more than you are with your own family. Right. So you hear points of view that typically you wouldn't hear unless you were in a particular area of the country that's relevant to that area or the culture there. So in 2017, I had surgery on my wrist. So I'm in the facility a lot more than I normally would be. And some of the rookies were having conversations about religion. And there's one young man, the first time I saw a Kemetic was in 2017. And then the brother was talking about how Christianity was stolen from ancient Kemet, and how Christianity never went south of Sahara and never went west. And how, Portugal brought Christianity to Africa, actually. And I'm sitting there listening to this stuff. And I go over to the young man and I say, "Who told you this? Like where did you hear all this information from?" And of course, I mean, it's the same things we always hear: the memes, the YouTube videos,
right.
And then this is actually right around the time you and I got connected.
Okay.
Because I was saying how, I'm gonna write a book for you. If you're such a scholar, you like studying, I'm gonna write a book. And I was moving forward that book, and you said, Don, you can write that book, and it could be a phenomenal book that nobody's going to read.
Oh, dang! Did I say that for real?
Yeah. So I
don't remember putting it like that,
but you what you were tapping into, you're tapping into the common layperson is not looking for the latest scholarly book to dispel the attacks from Kemet. And you were saying it may be a better idea to do a documentary.
Yeah.
To which I'm like, I don't have any connections to any scholars outside of you. I mean, I knew Chris Broussard, but like former scholars.
Right.
And I didn't have any cinematic skills. I can shoot some on my phone. But you made a connection to Lisa Fields that was crucial. And Lisa, around the same time, 2017, we're having conversations with a guy named Christopher Lamarck, who is an independent filmmaker out of Houston. He has a studio called Cross Cultural Studios. So Lisa and I get connected through you. And Lisa's been talking with Chris for about a year, and we each had what each other needed. Lisa knew the scholars. I was blessed to bring some financial resources, and Chris had all the cinematic skills. Wow. And that was our introduction into apologetics. I never really saw myself as being like an apologist. I still don't see myself being an apologist. I'm kind of really just a resource for people who really are boots on the ground like yourself.
Man, that's powerful, man. And you know what? So I hadn't really thought about it until you were talking, but I think that so being involved I've been involved in ministry for like a while, you know, but I feel like just my role in apologetics, I've been more boots on the ground, kind of like front line than I have in other forms of ministry. And, you know, honestly, man, like I've seen, I can honestly say, like, I've seen the hand of God move in ways just like you're talking about, like just people happen to meet the right people and connect at the right time and things like that. I've seen so many instances of that being involved in this apologetics movement. It's really humbling, actually, you know, to see how God is moving amongst his people, you know, to address, you know, real concerns. You know, like you said, I mean, who knows what would happen if you hadn't encountered that guy, you know, that Kemetic gentleman, you know, in that locker room that day. You know, who knows what would happen. And who knows what would happen if we hadn't had that conversation about the book and all that kind of stuff. I mean, to be honest with you, you were actually ahead of the time. I don't know if you realize this, but you were actually a little ahead of the game, you know, with the book idea, you know, in the sense that, and I didn't know this at the time, but I mean, I don't want to put anybody's name out, but I've heard multiple individuals who have published works now talk about how publishers themselves were under the impression that a book like the kinds of urban apologetic stuff that's coming out now would not sell. There wouldn't be a market for it. You know, that Black people wasn't reading stuff like that. But that perception has literally changed, you know, with the works that are coming out, you know. So it's pretty awesome to see it. But yeah, you was ahead of the game, bro. You was ahead of the game.
or you heard from the Lord.
Oh yeah, yeah, we'll go with that. You know,
let's say that. Something, but it is something that is amazing to watch. I mean, going throughout this process of making an Unspoken documentary, I just always had this feeling that the God of the Bible was intently involved in the lives of African and African descended people, past, present. And we should give them our hope and our faith for anything future. And just watching the way that he has been moving, particularly in his urban apologetic space, is extremely encouraging. Because I think in the back of every believer's mind, they want to know that the steps that they're taking are in line with the will of God, right? So I mean, the way my wife says, are we missing God on this? And to see the Lord taking the fruits of our labor and guiding us to individuals who can enhance and help us to get those messages out even further than we could have any other way, just shows that the Lord is in this, and he's helping us to always be able and willing to give a defense for the hope that is in us. And you know, praise his name for that, and hopefully he brings people to the faith through it.
No, I believe it's happening, man. I can tell you, like, firsthand. I've had multiple people approach me, you know, just in various different contexts, you know, talking about how, like, oh man, I got this cousin, or I have a daughter, or I have, you know, an uncle that was saying this and that about Christianity, basically the same kind of things that the Kemetic guy was saying in your locker room. And we showed them the documentary. You know, we sat down as a family and watched it. And they ain't have nothing to say. They couldn't, you know, they were just kind of floored by it. I mean, I've had multiple people come to me with testimonies like that. You know, just how God is really using the documentary to dispel those myths about Christianity being the white man's religion, man. You know, like from your end, like, what are you seeing in terms of the impact that the documentary, the Unspoken documentary, is having?
So it is extremely encouraging. So far the documentary has been shown in about 32 different countries. We get responses from individuals very similar to yourself. I was struggling with this question. They're in several categories. The responses are, I was struggling, with my faith, and you helped to shore up the faith with some of the things I was hearing. Or individuals say, I believed a certain thing about Christianity, but you all were able to expose history in a way that we have never seen or heard before. Which is amazing, because nothing that we say in the documentary is new.
It's not.
Right?
It really isn't. It's true. You're right.
But it's compartmentalized information that was brought together. So give you an idea of what I'm talking about. 53 sovereign nations in Africa, 52 have been colonized by countries not on a continent of Africa. So when we are putting together some of the source material that you all talk about in the documentary, I'm having to call around to multiple countries and different libraries not in Africa to get information about Africa.
Wow,
which is very difficult. And
COVID
COVID was kind of a blessing to us in the sense that people were actually at home doing nothing. So we were able to get email responses from everybody except Italy. Rome gave us no love.
Oh man,
they gave us no love.
Okay.
But those responses are very encouraging, and to see if you go look at the responses, we get the reviews on Amazon. We have an extremely high rating on IMDb. 8.4 for an independent film is very, very good. And I mean, I can't quite announce the next steps for Unspoken yet, but we're moving into potentially other platforms that are going to help us expand our reach even more. So I'm excited about it, and now I have a little more free time that maybe Lisa and I can sit down and talk about what the next steps are. Lord knows, in my heart of hearts, I want to go after every uncircumcised Philistine who's been blaspheming the name of the Lord.
Hey man, I know that's right. I
want to go. I want to deep dive group by group. But I honestly, I don't even know if that's warranted, because I've been seeing some of the work that you all have been doing. You and BK Apologists on, is this your king? I think, my God, I think that is phenomenal.
Oh man, let me tell you something, man.
That series
once Alfredo gets a hold of something, man, he gonna hit you with 1,000 slides, and all them joints gonna be daggers. Like once he says, "Yo, let me go to my screen right quick," hey, it's a wrap. You got some problems. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I'm wondering if it's a duplication of a lot of work that you all are doing there, which is phenomenal, or maybe we just have a conversation about how do we amplify that message that you all have. Again, I don't see myself in this apologetic space as being a frontline influencer, but maybe a resource to help you all, who are the true heroes, the true frontline gladiators.
Well, you never know, man. I mean, because the way that the documentary has been moving, I mean, it's been able to really get this message in certain spaces that we wouldn't touch. Like, perfect example, as you know. Shout out to Damon Richardson. He and I, we were at a showing of Unspoken at a church in Charlottesville just a couple months ago, and we were doing a panel discussion after the showing of it. And I think there may have been, like, other than us two, there may have been one other African American, in the audience. You know what I'm saying? It was just a whole crowd of mostly white folks. Wow. But what was surprising is that. And this is something that I honestly didn't foresee, when the project was just getting going, but just the impact that it had on the white community, so it's not just a matter of, African Americans seeing themselves in the scriptures, seeing themselves in African American history, but it's hard to even put it into words, just the degree to which you saw white brothers and sisters in Christ looking refreshed to see this multi-ethnic, multi-heritage, just movement, that God's kingdom has had from the inception of Christianity coming on the scene. It was just really powerful to see it. And just to be clear, like, this wasn't some sort of, I'm gonna use the term the wrong way, like some sort of like woke, whatever type of a crowd. The way that people use the term woke today, like, it wasn't a bunch of, bleeding heart liberals. Like, it was a very conservative crowd, for the most part. So, and yet there was that hunger to see a real depiction of what God has done amongst his people, man. So it's impacting, the kingdom in just so many different ways, man. So, if nobody said it to you, thank you for, your contribution to God's work in that way, brother.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'll reciprocate because you are in the documentary as much as anybody else is. So your your contribution was important, and honestly, man, just by God's grace, we were able to toe a very thin line of talking about race and religion in a way that doesn't skew conservative or skew liberal. But it's truly biblical through and through. If every section of that documentary brings people back to the foot of the cross, and that meant a lot to me. That meant a lot to me.
Absolutely.
That's how I try to live my life. I try to live my life at the cross, asking the Lord, what does He want us to do next? How can we glorify and partner with Him to bring forth His gospel?
Right. Well, actually, so that's a good segue, because one of the other things I wanted to talk with you about is you kind of, I guess we could say, like public life, if you will. So you kind of got the kingdom, in the traditional sense of what you're doing from a church standpoint, preaching the gospel. But as you mentioned earlier, you're a city councilman, in Chesapeake. You've been very active out here in VA, with respect to we'll get into campaigning for legislatures and so forth. But you've moved into that space of being a politician. And I know that we've had conversations about just the importance of, in that space as well, make sure you toe that line of being an authentic Christian and kind of being like, Daniel in the lion's den, you know what I mean? Like, you're a real Christian amongst some real political wolves. You had to take us into, what was it as a Christian, what compelled you to kind of get into that space? And maybe we can talk about how you navigate that.
Yeah. So I think that the first thing that compelled me to get involved in politics was I kind of was fed up with the way that politics is done. I felt that I can add some value to the conversation on the direction that the city was going. I didn't think we were being strategic enough in the city of Chesapeake and what we wanted the city to be when it grows up. Remember, 65 years old at this point. Not the oldest city in Hampton Roads, but we do have to make a decision on what we wanted to be when we grow up. And I just thought the political sphere was what was becoming too divisive, and the ideas of what I think about conservatism and liberalism versus a Democrat or Republican, there should be very distinct differences between each. But now I think we live in a world where liberalism is synonymous with being a Democrat, and conservatism is synonymous with being a Republican. And not only that, I saw a world where conservative or republicanism was becoming synonymous with being Christian. And I got a problem with that, 'cause I'm not prepared to live in a world where the Republican Party has a monopoly on Christianity. I think that's a big mistake. So I wanted to get involved in politics from that standpoint, to be able to have nuanced conversations that didn't involve me demonizing the other side all the time.
Got you. Now, see, that's powerful, because now I got to go here with it, because on the one hand, you said something very powerful about just that, people conflating, the Republican Party and being a Christian, as if one necessitates the other. But at the same time, as I understand it, obviously, you identify as a Republican, I believe. And then also being a black man, obviously, if people can't tell, thus far, I mean, they can look at the screen, obviously you're black.
Yeah.
And that just kind of is another piece, right?
Yeah. So I mean, it's interesting on several levels. So let's just deep dive in a bit what I'm talking about. When you talk about ideologies, conservatism and liberalism, they're political ideologies that one follows. The Democrat and Republican are just groups, a collection of people that come together to exert some type of power or influence in a political sphere. The thing that was really bothering me was I didn't see enough individuals focusing on what it really meant to be a conservative versus what it meant to be a liberal, as much as everybody was just focused on a Democrat and Republican. And that's problematic. That's problematic on its own. Secondly, I was perturbed with individuals who would stand and say that they're Christians, but then wrap Christianity up either in a American flag or belittle the teachings of Christianity or water it down to push forth some type of liberal agenda. Both of those, I think, are affronts and blasphemous to our Lord. So getting involved in politics for me was, I wanted to be an example of what a biblical Christian would look like within this space. Not saying that there are not others that are there,
got you.
but I felt like in my space, in our local area, we needed more. And I thought the best way of doing that would be through conservatism. We can definitely talk about what I think conservatism is. I thought it was a world where I can at least exist as an elected official, where the liberal side, the Democrat Party within the state of Virginia, is just too difficult to exist. But what I found is it is equally difficult to exist as a firm believer in the Democrat or the Republican Party and still hold to your biblical values.
Interesting. So you feel like on either side of the coin, there's going to be some problems there, being able to adhere to what the Bible lays out in terms of, from a moral standpoint, and maybe the things that flow from the scriptures. Like in either side of the coin, Democrat or Republican, there's going to be some problems there. You think?
Yeah, it's not. Yeah. So basically, what I'm saying is there is a constant call of Nebuchadnezzar to bow down to Nebuchadnezzar's golden image. They're constantly playing their instruments, and you seeing everyone else bowing down, falling in line to whatever the leaders of either party is saying, regurgitating the same talking points. And I don't hear enough individuals saying that I will not bow down, even if you throw me into the fire, my God is able to save or deliver me. But even if he doesn't, I still ain't bowing down.
See, now we got to go somewhere. So I hadn't intended on going here really, but you said something I think is interesting. It just happens to intersect with something I've been thinking a lot about, right?
Sure.
So when I think about spiritual warfare, right? Now, for whatever reason, I don't know why. I'm not a historian, so I'm not sure what this is about. But I feel like large sections of the church have like forgotten about spiritual warfare. Like we treat it like it's something back in the past in Jesus' day, and isn't real now or something like that. I don't know why that is. But I've been really thinking about through the scriptures, right? When you see Satan, or the demonic or something like that, functioning in the scriptures, I hesitate to say most often, but at least often, I'm saying it's through a person. I'm saying it's he has some sort of influence on a person to do and say something, and then they go and do and say something. I'm saying something that's contradictory to God's nature. Something sinful. So I'm thinking about Nebuchadnezzar, for example. I'm saying it could be I'm thinking about the book of Esther, where in the book of Esther you don't really have a clear I don't even think God is mentioned, in terms of like directly of doing this or doing that, but you're seeing how things are playing out amongst humans, and there's there's kind of like this understanding that behind that there are forces at work of a spiritual nature, And so I said all that to say that when it comes to spiritual warfare, like it's so easy sometimes. I think it's almost a cop out, in some ways, to relegate that to some sort of like exorcist type of situation, like something that's probably super rare, casting out a demon or something like that. It's not to say that it doesn't happen, but that's probably pretty rare. I think most often, when the enemy of our souls is doing something, he's doing it through a person, through somebody's immoral behavior, through deception that is being pushed out and so forth, and just various types of influence. And so bringing all that around, when it comes to the political realm, I think it's pretty safe to say that if a Christian is going to get involved in some real spiritual warfare, I think that the political sphere is a real battleground that most people, I think, just don't really take into account. I'm saying it's very real. Like it's not a game. Like it's not that it's that passage about we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principality and so on and so forth. I think that's a very real thing, and I think that it plays out in our politics far more than we understand. Like, do I sound crazy? Like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't know that it plays out any more than any other space. I mean, we probably can have the same discussion about the music industry. We probably can have the same discussion about family and culture and things of that nature. But politics is a unique space because God has given government the power of the sword at all times, right? So, I mean, the political sphere is unique in that regard. You can think the three spheres of influence that the Lord has really set up in Scripture. You have family, you have the church, and then you have government. Family. Parents have the sword to a certain point where the child grows up, and mom ain't whooping you when you're 20.
Well, let's hope anyway. Like, if
right,
she is,
right.
you got a whole different problem. But
yeah, the church only has the authority that you give it, right? If you give the brothers at the church the ability to sit you down when you're doing wrong, they will do that. But government has the power of the sword in which they can compel action from the moment you're born, even we're seeing now unborn, to the moment that you die. So for Satan to have a foothold in this sphere is, I think, from a strategic standpoint, very important to him. And that's why I said it's very difficult to walk this fine line of glorifying God down this narrow road that we learn about in Matthew 7, unless you're being guided by the Lord. You have to do this on your knees, asking the Lord, what would thou have me do next? Because I'm saying the pull to be political more than biblical is always around.
So yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I thought, man, because and I like the way that you laid that out. I mean, you definitely have those different spheres in which spiritual activity could be going on, but that government one is particularly problematic. Well, again, not necessarily problematic, but potentially problematic. Because there's, when you think about policies, being passed that can, I mean, with the stroke of a pen, can cause people's lives. I'm not ashamed to say, on my channel that I'm ardently pro-life. You know what I'm saying? I'm adamantly against elective abortions, and I think that when you're contending, in the political sphere in regard to something like that, I mean, it's literally a life or death situation. I think that's clearly a God agenda to save lives. So for somebody in your position, like, how do you navigate that piece? I'm saying, to have a conviction, because let's be real, let's be honest. There are times, when perhaps I'll just keep going with the pro-life angle. There are times where it appears, I'm not going to accuse anybody, it appears that the conservatives or Republicans could have done more, a lot sooner, to get things moving along, against abortion and so forth. And maybe sometimes they don't really live up to those convictions. Maybe sometimes they talk loud and then don't really act, so they don't really follow through in those sort of things. But for somebody like yourself who has this persistent biblical conviction, like, how do you manage that when your convictions drive you beyond the party, the platform, or whatever is advantageous for the party at that time?
Yeah. So for me, I'll try to look at everything through a biblical worldview, and the first question I always ask is, what does my Lord say about this issue? When I first got on council, I was under the mindset that not every vote is a God vote, right? There are some votes that are more significant than others, more impactful than others, to where I can, really maybe able to ask that question of what does the party want on this scenario. But what I've quickly learned is every single vote that you take is a God vote. Is either going to be glorified to the Lord or not. So I've learned, even on the smallest things, I'm looking at Scripture to say, okay, what does the Bible say about this thing, and how can I best glorify my Lord with this? And that puts you in direct opposition sometimes to your own party. And there have been several votes that I've taken that have put me in direct opposition to my own party. And I'm fine with that, because number one, who am I to fear man more than God? I mean, I think Bible is explicit about fearing man more than God. Do not fear he who can destroy the body, but fear he who can destroy the body and soul in the fires of hell. Clearly, the Lord wants us to follow him before we follow the way of the world. Secondly, one of my favorite characters in the Bible is Demas. So he's not a mainstay in the Bible. Paul writes about him 3 times, I think, in Scripture. And the last entry we hear of Demas is Demas, because of his love for the world, has departed me. All right, and falling away from the faith. So I'm constantly checking myself to make sure that my love for the world, that fleshliness of us that drives us to want to be successful and do things in the world, doesn't overtake my faith and my loyalty to the Lord. And but you got to be willing to be voted out, right? To stand for the Lord. And I'm under the mindset, if God wants me in this space, then He's going to keep me here.
Yeah, that's right. So it's interesting. I've never heard anybody say so. Like your favorite character is essentially a cautionary tale about what not to be. You know what I'm saying? That's like
it's very, very
interesting. I've never heard anybody say something like that. Yeah, it's interesting.
I have several. So
okay,
Demas in the New Testament, Balaam in the Old Testament. Both of those.
Yeah, he was wild. Yeah.
And as reminders, number one, of God's love and desire for a relationship, even for non-Gentiles, both of those individuals, I mean, even for non-Jews, or both of those individuals are Gentiles. But it's also a cautionary tale, particularly in Balaam's case, that God's justice and holiness is also present with His love. And in Demas, it's a case that the Lord is not going to hold you up. If you want to walk away, and I think He will honor that. Now, I think some of our Calvinists and Reformed brothers would disagree with that.
Okay, all right, okay.
that we having that conversation today.
Yeah. We're gonna table that for another time. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely. But they are reminders to me. I would also put Matthew chapter 7 in that reminder category as well. Especially Matthew 7:21. On that day, Lord, I've cast out demons in your name. I did all these works in your name. And He says, depart from me. I never knew you. You worker of iniquity.
I don't even know.
I find myself in a political sphere seeing how on that day, people who are Republicans are going to stand before the Lord and they're going to say, Lord, we fought back socialism in your name. We fought back the aborting of babies in your name. And He's going to say, depart from me. I never knew you.
Oof.
You worker of lawlessness. But at the same token, the Democrat Party, they're going to be individuals who stand before the Lord and hear the same type of judgments. So those things are reminders to me that, number one, never wrap your Bible up in a flag.
Come on, bro.
And secondly, never belittle the teachings of your Bible, that you're blaspheming the Lord by some of the things that you're putting forth.
Man,
and I think every believer in a political sphere should be heeding that. Because again, there is always a constant pull for you to be political rather than biblical. So we got to be mindful of those things.
Nah, man. Hey, that's powerful, bro. That's powerful. And again, to your point, it is. I think back to January 6th. That whole situation. Where you see people storming the Capitol with the Christian flag. It's like, bro, what are we doing right now?
Right.
What are we doing right now?
I need chapter and verse for that, honestly.
Yeah, really. And I find that fascinating. But to your point, like, you can't wrap your Christianity up in the flag. You know what I'm saying? Like, Christianity is not a costume. You know what I'm saying? It's not something you put on and take off for a particular occasion or to appear a certain way. It's got to really and just engulf every fiber of your being. You know what I'm saying? Like, in whatever sphere that you find yourself in. So yeah, it's definitely powerful. Now, I want to ask this question too, and feel free to answer it to whatever extent you want to, or not. Whatever you want to do. But I mean, we just keeping it funky. We just keeping it real. Obviously, there is the challenge. Whether you be on the progressive side of the house or the conservative side of the house, Democrat, Republican, whatever. There's a challenge that you talked about being biblical. Now, here's one of the things I want to get to. That there's also this idea that, similar to the notion, this notion of Christianity being the white man's religion, like, we've already dispelled that. You know what I mean? Like, some people would say that being a Republican or Republicans or being a conservative, that's like the white man's political party, or that's white man's politics, and there's something oxymoronic about being a conservative. Basically being anything other than Democrat. There's something oxymoronic about being anything other than Democrat and being black. Have you encountered pushback, from anybody in that regard? And then kind of how do you navigate that space from a Christian vantage point?
Yeah, and I haven't really got any pushback. I can't even say that with a straight face.
Okay. Well, I mean, now granted, you're an ex-NFL player, so people maybe they peep your highlights and they're like, "Dang, I don't really want to step to him like that." So
it was. Let me say, it was the shock of all shocks when I got involved in the political sphere, because people just thought, oh, he's going to be a Democrat. Even now today, when I show up and I'm talking about, a politician, if you don't know who I am, you'll just automatically assume I'm a Democrat. And that has been because for decades now, the Republican Party has done a horrible job of marketing its ideals to the African American community in ways that shows that republicanism or Republican ideals can actually benefit the Black community, which I think has been
so
a
you
huge
put the
thing.
responsibility on the Republican side of the house, because many people will say that African Americans are traditionally Democrat because of some of the subsidy programs and things like that. The Democrats have essentially duped the Black community into some sort of allegiance. But you would say that the Republicans really bear the responsibility.
I don't say that. That's the problem I would have with other conservative commentators like Candace Owens or trying to think I stopped listening to a lot of these conservative.
Hey, feel free to name names, man. Freedom of speech, brother.
So here's what I've learned from the time that I spent in the African American community, and long before I even was political, I was in the Black community doing a lot of work. We're far more communal than we are ideological on things. Like you will talk with. You will have conversation with people in the Black community and never talk about politics whatsoever. You wouldn't even know what somebody's political ideology was, and I didn't know some of the political ideologies of some of these African American or Black politicians until I got involved in politics. But the things that matter most is somebody showing up, maybe helping you with the situation that you're dealing with, maybe doing something at the school or having some type of program. That stuff I found means far more to people in the Black community than a particular ideology that they carry. It's the antithesis. For whatever reason, the Republican Party is so heady and intellectual that it is mainly only thinking about the ideologies that people carry. You know what I mean? And they're missing out on the human component of
the whole person's
right. And then they wait until October to say, well, how do we get the Black vote? Well, where were you at? December through September. My Jesus Christ, you physically have to show up. And I think that if the Republican Party actually did that, then it'll help out. But I'll tell you, man, I think the Republican Party does a horrible job. And I don't think it's a racism issue, but it is a race insensitivity, or just a racial indifference within the Republican Party that I think is a huge mistake. There's a huge voting bloc that has been neglected by both Democrats and Republicans. One has been, by Democrats and Republicans. Talking about the African American community, one group has been ignored, and the other group has been placated to. So, and I think whichever group fixes that issue, they'll find a very, very loyal base.
I agree, man. I agree, and I will say this, and I'm not trying to sway the listeners one way or the other, but I will say this, that for me, I love reading Black history. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not just something I do for the channel. It's not something that I just do, for a platform like this. I mean, this is really what I do. You know what I'm saying? I read a lot of Frederick Douglass. I read, the Henry Howard Garnetts and those guys. I've read, a decent amount of, what you might consider to be kind of like Black liberation type stuff. You know what I'm saying? That's not the word I'm looking for, but Pan-Africanism, like kind of early Pan-Africanist works, whether it be reaching back to the Crummels and people like that. Like, I've read a good amount of stuff, and what I find in the, whether it be the W.B. Du Bois's, the George Washington, Carvers, just various different writers, you know what I mean? Booker T. Washington, that's what I meant to say. I said George Washington Carver. Booker T. Washington, is that you find principles and ideas that sound very much like, the Republican platform, you know what I'm saying? Or I could say like a conservative position, you know what I'm saying? When it comes to, the importance of, I don't even want to say self-reliance, but just daggone, hard work, and what that looks like, in the community, and ownership and things of that nature. You see a lot of that, in many of our liberators' writings and things like that, so if you look at the Republican platform, much of it, and now again, I don't think that in its entirety it ultimately reaches the biblical standard. But I'm just saying some of the ideas really aren't foreign to the African American intellectual tradition. And so I think that sometimes we do ourselves a disservice, by being more tribal, than thoughtful in occasions. Does that make sense? Or
no, it definitely makes sense. And you touched on something that I was kind of getting to, was the tribalism that you have in both parties. I think is going to ultimately be the detriment of our country. If we can't have a common social fabric of individuals that we are interacting with, I mean, how can we be a country if you don't know how to play in a sandbox with each other?
Yeah.
And the tribalism that we see on the political sphere, being that it is so it is so crucial to our daily lives, given that God has given it the authority to have the sword from the moment we're born to the moment that we die. If it continues to grow, so far apart, I mean, you're left with civil war or just a country crumbling. And I hope we don't get to that point. I don't think we're quite at that point.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I do recall. I think it was. This is a whole different discussion. I think it was Marjorie Taylor Greene. Recently said something to that effect. that it's basically time for a civil war. And I don't mean to be insensitive, but I think people who think that way
are foolish. I'll say it for you.
Okay, appreciate it. I was gonna say something similar, but you said it, you much more bluntly, and I appreciate that. Yeah, I was gonna, for sure. I think that's foolhardy. I don't think that anybody really wants to see something like that. You know what I mean? I don't think that's realistic.
Yeah, definitely, man. We're definitely in some crucial times in American history, but we've already had a civil war. So nothing is to that point, I would say. And some of the things you touched on reminds me of Frederick Douglass. When the Republican Party was first formed, they were trying to get Frederick Douglass to actually join a party, and he was like, "Look, I don't think that I want to be down. Like I like what you all are trying to do. Part of why you all are banding together, because you want to free African Americans who are slaves." But he didn't know to what extent that commitment would last, and it was kind of a prophetic deal. Slavery is completely outlawed in America, December 6th of 1865. By 1868, you have your first Black elected officials in the South to Congress. It's 3 individuals, actually. They're all Republicans. Every federally Black elected official in the United States from 1868 till 1934 were all Republicans. Something happens around that time where you begin to have more Democrat elected federal politicians. By the 50s, it was almost like completely all Black Democrats. So I don't know what happened during that time, but whatever it was that Frederick Douglass was seeing that kind of gave him pause from joining the party, we're seeing that play out in full effect now.
I think, and again, I'm not a historian. I think that there's probably, I wouldn't want to oversimplify it. I think there's probably a bunch of different factors. I'm saying, but I will say this, and I'm pretty sure this would have been in Frederick Douglass' life. I'm not sure when he passed away, but I think about just the ending of Reconstruction. Obviously, at the end of the Civil War, you did have the Union or the North putting a number of protections in place in the South. That made it possible. For many I think it was something like well over 2,000 elected officials. I'm thinking about like sheriffs, judges, and just various different things you find in the South, kind of during that period, during Reconstruction. Which is a crazy number when you think about it. But there was a compromise made. I want to say is maybe the Reconstruction era lasted about a decade, but there was a compromise made to where the Republicans did indeed compromise, and they loosened or pretty much got rid of those protections and left African Americans vulnerable. So that's when you start to see this backwards, kind of a backtracking, if you will, in terms of African American progress, particularly in the South, because they weren't protected. You know what I mean? And so I think that to your point,
very interesting point. Very interesting point there. No, I'm not going to expound too much on it. But I do want to say this though. When I decided to run as a Republican, the concern was that I was not going to show up in the community anymore. I was not going to have the ability to speak up on issues, particularly issues that directly impact African Americans, and that my whole existence was going to be to protect this ideal white culture that stemmed from the 1950s, that a lot of boomers had. And I think I've been able to show my time as a council member that I'm willing to kind of buck against those trends, not because I'm trying to be a pro-black woke dude, but because I'm seeking, righteousness first.
Yeah.
And if you are going to be true to righteousness, then there are some things you're going to advocate for that may be against Republican ideals, but there are going to be certain things you advocate for that are with Republican ideals too. So I think that's kind of been a huge help for me as an elected official and a Black Republican. Now there's another thing I want to mention. Individuals ask me, but what am I doing for the Black community? What am I doing for Black people? And if I'm being honest with you, Adam, I don't know what that means.
Okay.
I don't fully know what that means, because we say all the time that the African American community is not a monolith. The things that certain individuals need in the Black community are not the same that other individuals need. So I don't think the proper question is, what am I doing for Black people? But when certain issues that arise that do impact some within the African American community, am I seeking to make the righteous choice?
Okay.
Right. No different than if something happens in the Asian, I hate to get all intersectional, but the Asian community or, the white community, am I seeking to make the righteous choice? Or am I looking only to make righteous choices when it's politically advantageous? I've learned that African Americans are uniquely in tune to stuff like that.
Interesting. Like, what do you mean by that? They're uniquely in tune to what aspect? As far as
I'll give you a perfect case. There was a situation in the city of Chesapeake several years ago where a very prominent African American judge retired, and her sister wanted to rename a court building after her as a way of honoring her for the groundbreaking career that she had. I mean, she was the first Black judge in the city of Chesapeake, the first Black woman judge in the city of Chesapeake. And she really helped formulate a lot of what we do within our court system and the juvenile department. Excuse me. Well, people were against that. People were against that. Well, okay, several years later, there was another prominent judge who died, a white gentleman, and everyone was so gung-ho to change the same building's name after him. Again, that's just an example of, well, are you seeking to do the righteous thing when it's politically advantageous, or are you seeking to do the righteous thing at all times? And I'm not going to tell you the reasons why people don't want to name the building after the first person I mentioned to you, because a lot of it is conjecture. You can say some of the things are racial, say it's because she was a Democrat. There's so many things you can add to that.
Could be, okay.
But the important thing was both of these individuals are impactful. Why would you be against one and not the other? So situations like that, we can have conversations about how do we seek the righteous path in those deals. But if you're just saying what am I going to do, carte blanche for all Black people, I don't know what you're talking about.
Gotcha.
The same way I wouldn't know what you're talking about if you're saying what am I doing for white people.
Well, see, now here's what's interesting about that, and this is another theory of mine. I'm not a political, scholar or anything like that by any means, but I do think that African Americans, and maybe from 2020 to maybe the end of 2021, this may be somewhat of an exception, but for the most part, I think that we take for granted the unity amongst ourselves, amongst African Americans, that mark so much of our history. And what I mean by that is, post integration, and I'll say, especially moving into the 80s and 90s, African Americans are certainly not in one spot. I'm saying we're definitely not a monolith politically and socioeconomically. We occupy various different parts, of the economic ladder. You know what I mean? And so, even though there's this sense of unity and solidarity, everybody is not in the same position. And so that's why you could have a Nicki Minaj or a Jay-Z You know what I'm saying? When they first get in the game, they start making some money. All of a sudden they started talking about like, dang, these tax codes, we need to do something about these taxes. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, like they're in a different tax bracket, and so everybody's not the same, man. But I think that we still have this old, I don't want to say there's still not some unity, but there's like some sort of a unity, like type of a relic that holds a lot of weight in the African American community. And sometimes I think it's to the extent that we don't acknowledge how much diversity there is amongst us. And so everybody's not going to be looking for the same thing out of our politicians. There's probably going to be some overlap, but somebody who's making 150 G's may want something very different. Again, like I use the tax code example, than somebody who's making 30 G's, and that's not an indictment against either person. It's just
or somebody that's retired,
or somebody's retired. Could be right.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, so that's really the same point that I was honing in on. All of us have different situations, different things that matter most to us. So I think it's very disingenuous to say, "What are you doing for Black people, carte blanche," as if we're all the same. Right. And secondly, you mentioned something about integration. Here's one of the issues I have with the way that we integrated our system racially is we integrated one way. Right.
Okay.
I think if we were busing white kids to Black schools along with Black kids to white schools, we'd be in a much different situation than we are now. So it kind of led to the credence that what was going on in the African American community was not what we should be seeking after. Rather, we should seek to be whatever the dominant culture whatever the dominant culture was. And I think that's very problematic because you do have, I think you have a sense of some individuals not liking white people simply because the idea of busing Black kids to white schools only made it seem as if Blacks were inferior. It was, again, it seemed to be something that continued to confirm what had been a resounding message through Jim Crow and all those things. So I think that's a problematic mistake that happened during the civil rights movement. And I think Martin Luther King would have lamented that too.
I think you're probably right. And I think there's so many different complexities. And this is one thing that I'll say, and I'm not trying to, shade anybody or whatever, but like this whole time we've had a robust conversation about theology. We had a robust conversation about, this kind of inner workings of politics. And we've touched on a lot of different topics. You as a conservative, obviously you're very versatile in the way that you're engaging, these things. And then I feel like what happens is the conservative Black voices that seem to find the largest platform are the people who really aren't able to have these robust discussions. You know what I'm saying? And I'm thinking about like the Jason Whitlocks of the world. No shade on him, but I don't care what the conversation comes down to. Somehow everything falls on the Black family. Like somehow that's as far as conversation can go. Is talking about Black families and fatherlessness. Those things are very important. I've spoken on it myself, on the show, but there's so many different elements that we can't get hung up on any one particular thing. You know what I'm saying? Like fatherlessness didn't write, discriminatory policies back in the 1960s. I mean, like, there's so many different pieces to the pie. Why do you feel that, and we don't have to name names, but why do you feel there's a hesitance to embrace voices like yourself and platform those voices who can have intelligent, robust discussions, as opposed to platforming people who aren't able to kind of really give us something substantive, at least consistently?
That's a great question. I think that too is a very nuanced deal. I think some individuals do just want to push whatever the party is saying, the party lines. They're kind of they kind of give off a vibe of I'm one of you. I will always fight for you by conservatism and religion, whatever the dominant culture is. I think that's one avenue. I think certain individuals would always put as you mentioned, like Jason Whitlock, which I agree with a lot of what Jason Whitlock says. Being totally completely honest with you,
sure.
But I do think the error that a lot of conservatives make is that they simplify situations that are extremely nuanced.
That's my point, right?
Yeah, exactly. the oversimplification of very nuanced situations, and honestly, it goes both ways. I can't just say just conservatives.
Fair enough. Yeah.
For instance, I recently ran for the state delegate seat, and I lost my primary. Well, a lot of people in the Black community thought it's because I'm Black. They thought there was a racial component to it, and there were, for a good number of voters, a racial component to it, but it was far more nuanced than just race. I actually wish it was racism is the reason I lost, because racism is overt, is plain, is blatant. You can see it. I think that the reason I lost the race was far more nuanced than it being racism.
Gotcha.
So I don't know the answer to that question. All right.
Yeah.
Maybe if we sat down and kind of had like a whole another hour to talk about it, we can kind of
I know. Yeah, I got
we can dive into it. But I would say that the thing that bothers people most about me is I'm equally willing to call out the issues and faults in the Democrat Party, the same way I'm equally willing to call out the issues and faults in the Republican Party. And people don't like to hear that they're the problem.
Yeah,
don't like to hear that they're the problem. Secondly, people do not like it when you say that you're a Republican, but you're willing to support a Democrat for something. Or that you're a Democrat, but you're willing to support a Republican for something. Again, that's the tribalism part of politics that is really damaging to the political sphere.
Yeah, it's really it's like they be on some gang type stuff. You know what I mean? It's you know what I mean. I can imagine the Congress walking around with like a red flag hanging out of his right pocket type of thing. You know what I mean? Like if you ain't banging with it, you know, I got no love for you.
In a lot of ways, I mean, you're joking, but honestly, there are a lot of similarities.
Wow,
there are a lot of similarities, and I think the reason we got to this tribalistic point is we've lost the nuance of what it means to be a conservative and what it means to be a liberal.
And one thing I like about what you said. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I cut you off.
No, the ideologies that girded a political worldview is been so watered down that all you have now is Republican and Democrat.
And so I was going to say, I like that you broke that down, because I think that when you take the focus off of ideologies and just kind of put them on labels, then it's easy to manipulate people, because nobody really knows what anybody is for or against anyway. It's they're just kind of fighting for a tribe and for a label.
Yeah,
you know, if we're talking about ideologies,
I had this saying that where a gray area exists, the extreme views always win. So if you're saying, if you can ask anyone, what does it mean to be a Republican? What does it mean to be a Democrat? And I think the average person would describe what it means to be a Republican or a Democrat in the same way that they would describe a car. They'll start telling you attributes about the car, but they will not tell you exactly what the definition of a car is. So they'll say, you know, a car has 4 doors or 2 doors. A car has wheels. Instead of saying a car is a motorized mechanism that gets you from point A to point B. Right. You're losing the true definition of a thing. And when there's gray area, the loudest voices, the most extreme voices are able to put together, you know, the most support are the ones that win out. And we see that playing out a lot in our political sphere. Now, one of the things that drew me to conservatism is I believe that conservatism is the preservation of institutions that allow for the raw material that we exist to grow to be the final masterpiece of whoever we're going to be when we grow up. So,
all right, bro, you got to break that down, bro.
Yeah,
you definitely got to break that down.
So, when I say the raw material, when you're born, you are a life full of potential. You are the exact existence of all of the intersectionalities that brought you to that point, right? You're raw. You're not refined. The things that refine you to ultimately be the type of human being you're going to be are going to be your family. They're going to be your religious worldview. They're going to be the education system. They're going to be the economy that allows you opportunities to seek certain types of employment. So conservatism says it's by preserving those institutions, namely family, religion, education, and the particular economy, built upon the foundation of the Judeo-Christian worldview, being the best means of defining what life, liberty, and property are. And secondly, being built upon the logistical means of carrying out one's life, liberty, and property, being the Constitution. So we preserve the Constitution because it is laid out in a particular way that allows for the human flourishing and the individual to best seek that American dream and become the masterpiece of who God's designed them to be. That's what conservatism should be.
Okay, all right.
What conservatism now is, Republicans who fight against Democrats. And that's sad.
Right.
And that's sad. You've lost that important nuance. You've lost that important nuance of the purpose of the Republican Party is to assist individuals in becoming the masterpiece of who they're designed to be, built upon a Judeo-Christian worldview and carried out logistically by the tenets of the Constitution. And then liberalism, if I'm being charitable, what I think will be a constant focus on the individual freedoms of people, right, and the acceptance of those individuals. And I know that may sound interesting, the individual freedoms of people. You would think that's like a conservative deal, but I'm talking about if an individual wants to see themselves as whatever they want to see themselves, we accept that. Right. It's been logistically played out and an appeal to the majority over a collective authority, where conservatism has been an appeal to an authority over a collective majority. And because there's no limiting principles within liberalism, ultimately they do not have the framework in which to tell the crazies to sit down.
Interesting. So do you feel like would you say that the liberalism, as you described it, would you say that it's kind of like a conservatism untethered from some particular, like it's like conservatism unhinged, like when you take individualism to the extreme, so maybe it's like a progression from the conservative. Not, and I don't want to use the word progression because that implies move toward like some sort of progress, but I'll just say a divergence from conservatism as opposed to its own freestanding thing. Is that kind of how you see it?
I think both conservatism and liberalism have to coexist. I really don't see a world where you can just have a fully conservative country and not grow to be something that's detrimental, or even have a fully liberal country and not grow to be something that's detrimental. And then there used to be a world where you would have liberal Republicans and conservative Democrats. Right. And in that world, you can actually get things done. And that actually kind of fought against some of the tribalistic nature that we have. It's hard to be tribal to a sense where when there's infighting ideologically that causes you to look at your own faults and continue to refine yourself. So I think in that sense, liberalism and conservatism kind of need each other in order that they continue to refine each other. Right. Taking advantage of the common person. But it's so politically toxic now that you cannot be a conservative in a Democrat Party, and it's hard to be. Well, I guess you can have liberals in the Republican Party, but it's hard to be a prominent voice in the Republican Party if you're a liberal.
Well, I think it goes back to something you said earlier in that the parties. This may not be true for the ideology, but certainly the parties. There's a centering around power. At the end of the day, people want to keep their jobs and they want to continue to push forth whatever agenda they want to push forward. So it's kind of hard to untether power from, just this party structure that we have, and maybe people become intoxicated with that and they lose sight of the ideology that they're supposed to put forth. But to your point though, I wonder, and I know I gotta let you go, so I can speculate all day, but I'm really wondering about when it comes to that conservative piece. I wonder if what you said earlier is the best way forward, of like that kingdom focus. I'm saying, because I think that if you have this kingdom focus, this centering around kingdom ethics, then it almost acts as to kind of sterilize conservatism. And by that I mean, some of the Enlightenment era ideals that are kind of interwoven with conservatism, an overemphasis on man and the individual. Like, I think that's counterbalanced by the kingdom ethic. You know what I mean? So it doesn't run amok and become something like what we may describe liberals as being. Does that make sense? Or
I mean, yes and amen.
Yeah.
I would love for a world where more individuals in politics, whether Democrat, Republican, liberal, or conservative, would seek guidance from the Lord in the decisions that they're making.
Gotcha.
It just so happened again, Matthew 7, that the road is narrow.
Yeah.
The road is narrow. And just as you have more unbelievers in every other sphere than you have believers outside of the Christian worldview, I would say that also exists within politics.
Gotcha. No, it's all good, man. This is a sign that I need to go ahead and let you go. You know what I mean? People who watch the channel, they already know how I get down, man. The kids can run up here anytime.
This is my life. If I'm at home, I got a baby in my arms, right, or my daughter, or my oldest son. So this makes it all worth it right here.
Yeah, awesome, man. Awesome. Well, hey, man, first of all, I appreciate you coming on. We definitely got to circle back around and have you back on, man, because there was a couple other things I wanted to get to as well.
And if I could say these last words, regardless of the sphere of influence the Lord has placed you in, I think the mindset should be, how can I glorify you with the way that I live, the decisions that I make, the votes that I take, if you're taking any votes, or the way that you lead people. Our lives are forever indebted to the Lord for saving us, and we should be living testimonies. As the Lord says, let your light so shine amongst men, so that when they see your good deeds, they glorify the Lord in heaven. So find ways to glorify God, and be ever mindful that the world is always going to try to pull you away. So watch out for the way of Demas, because just as he was taken away from the faith, don't be so arrogant, Athena, you can as well.
That was a sobering and a powerful way to end it out, man. I appreciate you sharing that for sure. Real talk, man. Yeah, I just have the utmost respect for you, bro. I really do, man. And I appreciate you coming on. You've been a great friend to me, to what I'm doing here, and just on a personal level, man. I have the utmost respect for you, bro. So thank you for coming through. Definitely gonna have you coming back on. I'm gonna find that highlight. You know what I mean, from that Aaron Rodgers joint. You know what I mean.
But, I'll send it to you. It's
okay. There we go. That'll work.
All right. Yeah.
Hey, love you, bro, man. Y'all know what it is, man. Hit us up on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. If you feel so inclined, support us at patreon.com/Adam Coleman. Y'all know what it is, man. Love God, love people. Take care of the things that God blesses you with. Peace.